Hey, and welcome back to our Primary Care Network YouTube channel. My name is Tara Humphrey, and my team and I support primary care networks with the day-to-day management of their networks, and we also provide some facilitation and training. Now, this video is inspired by a question I was asked at Best Practice Birmingham. You know, when somebody asks you a question and then you kind of reflect back on your answer and you think, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that, I should have said this. So this is my opportunity to rectify that. Okay, I've created a little bit of a slide deck to keep me on track. I think you are going to need a pen and paper for this video, okay? So I've called it a guide to scenario planning, but it links to a blog I've already written called How to Approach Primary Care Network Pay Rises in 2023 and Beyond. So read that blog alongside watching this video, or not at the same time, but you know what I mean. So let's jump in. So to set the scene, as far as I'm aware, and I may be wrong, but as it stands today, the additional role reimbursement scheme financial envelope is not set to increase in 24-25. It doesn't necessarily mean that there will not be a cost of living increase. I don't know. But let's assume for now that it's not. So that pot of money that we've got today is the pot of money that we've got to have tomorrow. So the challenge that many PCNs are going to be grappling with is how can we recruit staff at a competitive salary which networks can sustain but not be so attractive it causes conflict and competition within their networks. Challenge is, where do you get the additional money from as you move forwards? These are some of my thoughts and ideas and suggestions, okay? It's not the answer, but this is my approach. First thing I would do is I'd do some planning and research. So I went onto the gov.uk website and saw this. So for 23-24, the government has given the Agenda for Change staff at 5%. So 5% this year. I'd also want to do a baseline. So I'd really just want to make sure I've got my finances in order and I understood how much we're paying all of the staff currently. I'd also want to do a piece of work where I looked at the pay scales in practices, because we want to close the gap. We don't want this two-tier workforce. So I would want to do that. It's just an idea, just a suggestion, because we want to see what is the current status. So that would be my approach. And then in doing that, that would lead me into a scenario planning piece of work. Let me see if I can explain this in the simplest way. But what I would do, I would take all of my salaries, I put them in a spreadsheet. You've already got your spreadsheet, so you don't need another one. Use your spreadsheet. And in that, you will have your maximum reimbursable rate. You'll also know what your maximum salary is that you can offer. And if you don't know, you can head over to our salary calculator on our website to understand what the maximum salary you can offer is. Okay. Then I would calculate what does, for example, a 3% increase look like? What does a 4% salary increase look like? What does a 5% salary increase look like? I would calculate what that salary is, and then I would calculate what that potential overspend is to the PCN. Okay, so as an example, 3% increase on a clinical pharmacist at the top of the maximum reimbursable scheme. If I wanted to give them a 3% pay rise, roughly, like rounded up, rounded down, will be around £51,000. The overspend to the PCN will be £2,000. Okay. You want to do that for all of your roles, and you want a few different scenarios. So 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, just so you know what you're working with. So there's no surprises. And I would do this for 3 years. Okay, so don't just do it year on year. It's a formula, so it shouldn't be too hard to calculate. Okay, so that would be my approach. Do this for all of your roles, because we want to be able to see actually how much money could this potentially cost the network / the system. Okay, so how much is the overspent? That is the first round of scenario planning. Okay. So for part two, or might be part three, if you are able to baseline your general practice salaries, is to then think about, if from a primary care network perspective, if you've got a projected overspend in year one of £30,000, and that will just keep going up, is where can you get this money from? And some just suggestions, you might be your ICB. You might be able to build a case to your ICB and say, look, this is how much it's going to cost the network. We can't manage this. So you could go to your ICB. You might be able to go to your system partners. If you've got some roles that are shared, or that some parts of the system really see a benefit because you can demonstrate, like avoidable appointments and X, Y, and Z, you might be able to go to some of your system partners. And from an ICS perspective, it might be a really rich conversation and a really good way to move to more integrated care. There is the Practice Participation Fund, and sometimes we forget about that money. And the reason why I bring it up is because in some networks give a proportion of that money to the network for contingency. So you could use, one option could be that you consider using your Practice Participation Fund to fund that overspend. You could also use your local capacity and access payment for this year's. You can carry it over into next year's, the 70%, and if any of you ever see any of the 30%. Okay, so this might be an option. And then there's practices. I know that there'll be people saying there's no way practices should fund this, it's not fair. The only reason why I'm suggesting practices is because in some parts of the country, some practices already pay over the overspend, and that comes from practice funds. And you're taking that, in this instance, a £30,000 overspend, and what does it look like per practice based on list size? And then you need to decide your evaluation criteria. So what's the likelihood of getting anything out of the ICB? It might be very low. The sustainability of this, is it low, like low, medium, high? What are the risks associated with this? And then there'll be lots of other evaluation criteria that you can consider to appraise what the options would be. So that would be what I would do. It's a big piece of work, and I think this is a really good opportunity to do this, not just in one PCN, but to do this across the patch. So your local system understands the investment required to sustain this workforce, retain this workforce, because cost of living does go up and salaries should reflect that. So it's not perfect, but this would be my approach, to start being a little bit more strategic about it and start to have these conversations sooner rather than later. So now you have collated some really rich data. I would say we're now moving into how do we influence this with a positive lens? That is my approach, rather than just saying, this is not my problem, this is your problem, ICB staff, you sort it. I would try to do it in a slightly more positive way. And that's not just to talk about it, is to show my calculations, to show the research, to show this is a deficit, these are all our workings out. But, we've got multiple options, so we're trying to see it from multiple points of view. I would also break down the calculation. Some people want to see it per role, some people want to see it on aggregate and combined. So definitely don't take any shortcuts, and really, when you're presenting this information, really try to put yourself in the position of the reader. We want to make the document and the findings and the evidence as easy to read as possible. So I would also look to gather other data to strengthen my case. So that might be appointment data. It might be how certain roles contribute to enhanced access. It might be QOF. It might be impact and investment. It might be avoidable appointments. There'll be other data points that you can capture to say, this is what this workforce generates for our community, our population, our system. They're so valuable. We do not want to lose them. How can we reach the desired destination? So it's not just about the money, it's the impact and the value that the roles bring, which will have a huge cost saving. and investment into that local population. Those of you, we write business cases all the time. Every options appraisal should have a do nothing option. Okay, so don't forget that. What do we just do if we say we're just going to do nothing and we're just going to pray? And then, as I've said, I would work with other PCNs to do this piece of work with your system leads if they're interested, but to strengthen your case. This is a common shared issue. Okay, we've got a financial envelope that we're going to exceed. Where does that money come from? And we've got PCNs to think about and practices to think about. So when thinking about your positive framing and influencing, put yourself in the shoes of the ICB, put yourself in the shoes of the employee, put yourself in the shoes of general practice, like it's not one dimensional. And in order to reach your desired destination, your audience wants to know that you appreciate the complexity of the situation and that you appreciate other people's points of view and not just your own. If it doesn't resonate, just leave it, move on. You don't need to visit it again. Or there may be some little points you think, actually, that would be helpful if we did that. Give yourself that assurance. And we've got time. At the time of recording, it is now October. So you've got plenty of time to do this exercise. So you can go into 24, 25 with this in your back pocket, knowing, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. We've already identified the funding source. We've already had the conversation, and we can just crack on. If you do find it helpful, it'd be great if you let me know. Just leave a comment, message me. I would love to know. I want to make sure I am creating and sharing helpful stuff. So